David unfolded the letter with trembling fingers, the paper soft from being handled too often. His breath hitched as he read the words that cleared his name, yet the weight of years spent under suspicion didn't lift. He whispered, "They finally admit I wasn't guilty." The walls seemed to close in with the memory of accusations, the nights in silence, the friends who disappeared when the headlines broke. He pressed the letter to his chest, clutching it like it could rewind time. But redemption was not ink on paper. It was a road he still had to walk. He thought of Richard, the man who rose higher while David fell, the one who profited from his disgrace. His jaw tightened. Grace wasn't forgiveness handed easily. It was a cost no fortune could settle. David muttered, "If he thinks I came back for revenge, he's wrong. I came to claim myself." The scuffed diploma on the shelf stared at him, a quiet witness to dreams deferred. David folded the letter back into its envelope, sliding it beneath a stack of unpaid bills. He thought, proof means little when memories scream louder. His phone buzzed, unknown number flashing, and he froze. The call felt heavier than the paper he held, a signal that his past wasn't finished with him. He muttered, "Not yet," letting it ring into silence. His reflection in the cracked mirror across the room showed a man he barely recognized, lines etched by regret and waiting. Redemption would not come by mail or silence. It demanded motion, confrontation, and a courage he wasn't sure he still carried. David stepped outside, the cold morning biting against his skin. The street smelled of exhaust and damp pavement. Neighbors glanced, whispering, some avoiding his eyes. He tightened his coat and said under his breath, "They still see the headline, not the truth." Passing a shuttered store, he remembered Richard's booming laughter the day David lost everything. The sound echoed like a scar. He whispered, "He built on my fall." His fists balled in his pockets, but his stride stayed steady. Grace wasn't about erasing scars. It was about walking with them in daylight. At the corner cafe, David pressed his palm against the cold glass door but hesitated. Inside, laughter rose, familiar faces gathered. Years ago, he had been one of them. Now he was an outsider. He muttered, "One step in and I'll feel their eyes weigh me down." But hunger gnawed louder than pride. He stepped inside, scanning the room, shoulders squared. A young barista looked up, recognition flickering across her face before she masked it with polite neutrality. David ordered coffee, voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. David sipped the bitter coffee, each swallow heavy with memory. He sat alone at a corner table, his back against the wall, scanning faces for judgment. Conversations hushed when his eyes met theirs, then resumed louder, forced. He remembered late nights here with Richard, planning futures. The irony stung. David set the cup down, the ceramic clinking louder than intended. He whispered, "Every second chance begins with swallowing bitterness." His jaw eased, his gaze steady now. Whatever came next, it would not break him as before. David left the cafe and walked down Main Street, his steps heavier than the morning traffic. The letter in his coat pocket felt like both a shield and a burden. He thought of his daughter, Emily, who had not spoken to him in 5 years. Her silence cut deeper than any verdict. He whispered, "I need her to see I'm more than my mistakes." The truth was simple yet unbearable. He had missed birthdays, graduations, and a chance to be present when she needed him most. David's resolve hardened as he imagined her face, grown older, more guarded. Redemption was not just about clearing his name in public. It was about restoring one fragile bond. He muttered, "I want the right to show up again." His reflection in a shop window showed a man scarred by time, but not broken. People passed by without seeing him, but he carried a fire within, one that refused to die, even when the world turned its back. David stopped outside a narrow brick building with peeling paint. It was the community center where he once coached kids before the scandal swallowed him. Inside, the walls had changed, but the echoes of laughter felt familiar. He pressed his palm against the door, remembering Emily's voice from years ago, calling out his name on the court. He whispered, "She believed in me then." The thought stung. The world had stripped him of his role as mentor and father, leaving him with only memories. A part of him wanted to turn away, to avoid reopening wounds. Yet he stepped inside, air heavy with sweat and polished wood. A young coach eyed him warily, recognition flashing in narrowed eyes. David said, "I'm not here to relive the past. I'm here to prove I've changed." His voice trembled, but the truth in it held steady. This place was not his anymore, but it might become part of his rebuilding if he could face it. David sat in the empty bleachers, hands clasped tight, eyes drawn to the faded scoreboard. The sound of bouncing basketballs and sneakers squeaking echoed memories he could not silence. Emily once ran across this floor, braids swinging, her smile wide when he cheered from the sidelines. Now that smile lived only in his memory. He muttered, "If I fail here, I fail her again." The weight of the second chance pressed on him, not as a gift but as a test. He thought of calling her but feared the silence on the other end. What if she answered only to tell him to stay away? He whispered, "I'll take the risk, even if she shuts the door." His chest tightened, but he lifted his head, refusing to bow under invisible chains. A second chance wasn't about forgetting. It was about proving he could stand in the same place and choose better this time. Later that day, David stood outside Emily's workplace, a bookstore tucked between glass towers. He had rehearsed the words 1,000 times, each version collapsing under the weight of fear. Through the window, he saw her arranging books, older now, carrying herself with guarded grace. His chest ached with the years stolen by silence. He whispered, "She deserves the truth, not excuses." His palms sweated as he pushed open the door, the bell above chiming like a judge's gavel. Emily looked up, her eyes freezing when they landed on him. The air turned heavy. David managed, "I came because I can't undo the past, but I want to try for a future." His voice broke, steadying only as he met her gaze. She said nothing, expression unreadable, but her pause was louder than rejection. Hope flickered, fragile but alive. For David, this was the beginning of his truest trial. The silence stretched between father and daughter, fragile as glass. David took a slow step forward, heart pounding. He said, "Emily, I don't expect forgiveness tonight. I only want you to see I've kept walking even in the dark." Her eyes flickered with conflict, anger and longing battling within. She set the book in her hands down carefully, as though dropping it too hard might shatter her composure. David's throat tightened. He remembered every voicemail left unanswered, every letter returned unopened. He added, "I missed years I can't reclaim. All I can offer now is consistency." Emily finally spoke, her voice steady but cool. "Words are easy, Dad. Patterns tell the truth." Her statement cut, but also gave him a path. David nodded slowly. He knew her trust could not be rushed. Yet her words were not rejection. They were conditions. And conditions meant there was still a door, however narrow, left open. David woke before dawn, the letter still tucked into his jacket like a talisman. He had promised himself progress, so he walked to the bus stop for a job interview at a factory across town. The street was cold and empty, a thin mist clinging to the asphalt. He muttered, "No more excuses, no more delays." The bus came late, packed, every seat filled with tired faces. He stood gripping the overhead bar, sweat forming under his collar. As the bus jerked forward, he thought of the interview ahead. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance to prove reliability. He whispered, "I'll take steady over shining any day." When he arrived, the gates were already closing for shift change, his late arrival noted by the guard. The man shook his head and said, "Timing matters here." David felt the sting of wasted effort, but he clenched his jaw. Failure would not be final. At the factory gate, David pleaded for understanding, but the guard remained firm. "Rules are rules," the man said, eyes tired but unmoved. David forced a calm tone. "I'm here to start again, not to bend the lines." Yet he felt humiliation press down. He walked away, the sound of machinery inside echoing like a life denied. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Still chasing scraps, I see. The cruelty made his blood boil. David muttered, "You built on my ruin, but I'll never crawl back." He deleted the message without reply. Anger threatened to drag him under, but he steadied himself. Each step away from the gate was a test, rage or resolve. He chose resolve. He whispered, "Every locked door pushes me toward the one that opens." His pride hurt, but his will stood stronger than it had in years. Later that afternoon, David met with Mark, his old sponsor, at a diner near the river. Mark, graying at the temples, looked at him with cautious patience. David admitted, "I slipped into anger today. Richard knows how to twist the knife." Mark sipped coffee and replied, "Anger isn't the problem. What you do with it is." David stared at his reflection in the glass tabletop, ashamed but steady. He said, "I didn't lash out. I walked away." Mark nodded. "That's growth, but growth needs proof." The truth stung, but David accepted it. He wasn't trusted yet. Earning back respect meant showing up again tomorrow, and the next day, until people believed the pattern. David whispered, "I'm tired of being a shadow. I want to be seen without suspicion." Mark placed a hand on the table, steady and firm. "Then keep showing up," he said. That evening, David stopped by the probation office to check in. The officer, Ms. Harris, eyed him with bureaucratic precision. She scanned the letter and asked, "Exonerated on paper, but habits take longer to clear. Why should I believe you've changed?" David's chest tightened, but he answered evenly, "Because I'm still here, still trying, still refusing shortcuts." She tapped her pen, unimpressed, but listening. The silence pressed heavy. David thought of Emily's words, "Patterns tell the truth." He whispered, "All I ask is the chance to prove it." Ms. Harris leaned back, her tone clipped, "Prove it with consistency, not speeches." He nodded, accepting the weight. Walking out, he felt frustration gnaw at him, but there was clarity too. The world wasn't waiting to forgive, it was waiting for receipts. Night fell as David walked home under flickering street lamps. His feet dragged, exhaustion heavy, but his mind replayed the day's trials. A locked factory gate, Richard's message, the cold precision of Ms. Harris, each was a wall. Yet he realized walls could teach endurance. He whispered, "They want proof, not words." He thought of Emily, her guarded eyes in the bookstore. If he could keep walking despite setbacks, maybe one day she'd see the truth in his pattern. A gust of wind scattered trash across the sidewalk, and David caught a scrap of newspaper against his leg. The headline was old, his name printed in bold, accusing. He crushed it in his hand, then let it go, watching it tumble away. His chest eased. He wasn't erasing the past, but he refused to be chained to it anymore. David sat in the library, documents spread across the table, chasing fragments of his past. He had requested records, hoping to find something to prove Richard's hand in his downfall. The papers smelled of dust and ink, each file a piece of memory, both forgotten and forced. His hands trembled as he opened a folder marked confidential. Inside, he found financial reports. Richard's signature scrawled across deals made the same month David's reputation collapsed. His chest tightened. He didn't just benefit, David whispered. He orchestrated it. The realization cut through him like a blade. For years he thought the world had abandoned him by chance, but here was proof of betrayal. Anger roared inside, but beneath it lay a strange calm. The truth was no longer suspicion, it was documented, undeniable. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with the weight of revelation. Everything had shifted in one moment. David carried the documents out, the cold air of evening striking his face like ice water. The betrayal simmered inside him, but so did clarity. Richard hadn't merely risen while David fell, he had set the fall in motion. David clenched the folder tighter, whispering, "This isn't revenge, it's truth." He pictured Emily's guarded eyes and realized her forgiveness could never come if he ignored the full story. Betrayal was not only his wound, it was the reason she grew up without him. Yet, exposing Richard came with risk. Richard was powerful now, well-connected, shielded by influence. One step could mean open war. David stopped beneath a flickering streetlight, shadows stretching long. He muttered, "If I stay silent, I am complicit. If I speak, I may burn everything left." The choice was no longer about dignity alone. It was about justice, and whether he was ready to pay its cost. David met Mark again, sliding the documents across the diner table. Mark's eyes scanned the pages, his jaw tightening. He whispered, "This isn't just betrayal, David. It's fraud calculated." David's voice cracked. "He profited from every day I was gone." Mark looked up, steady but worried. "You realize bringing this forward won't just hurt him. It'll drag you back into the storm." David felt the words like weights. He stared at his reflection in the glass, voice low. "I spent years silenced by lies. If I stay quiet now, I'll never earn my second chance." Mark leaned in, tone sharp but caring. "Then you must decide. Truth that costs everything, or peace that means nothing." David exhaled, steady for the first time all day. He said, "I didn't come this far to trade silence for survival." His path was forming, dangerous yet necessary. That night, David dreamed of Emily as a child, running across the basketball court, her voice echoing with laughter. He woke with tears on his face, the folder still on the table beside him. He whispered, "This isn't just about me, it's about giving her truth." For years, Emily believed her father's shame was his own making. Now he held proof that betrayal shaped her childhood. He rubbed his temples, mind spinning. If he revealed Richard's corruption, Emily might finally understand, but she might also recoil from the chaos that followed. He muttered, "Truth doesn't guarantee forgiveness, but lies guarantee distance." The dawn light spilled through the blinds, cutting across his weary face. He resolved to bring the documents to Emily first before the world. She deserved to know the cost of his absence. His second chance depended not on the court of law, but on her eyes. David stood once more outside the bookstore, folder clutched tight, and inside, Emily moved between shelves, unaware of the storm he carried. His pulse thundered as he stepped through the door. She looked up, wary but steady. He whispered, "Emily, I need you to see this." She hesitated, folding her arms. David placed the folder on the counter, voice breaking. "I wasn't absent because I gave up. I was betrayed, set up, and you deserve to know who profited." Emily opened the folder slowly, her eyes scanning the pages, disbelief softening into something deeper. Pain, recognition, shock. She whispered, "Richard?" Her voice cracked on the name. David nodded, silence heavy between them. The revelation wasn't a bridge yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between father and daughter. The cost of truth had begun. David left the bookstore shaken by Emily's stunned silence. "I told you to almost made." He walked the city streets until night settled, his mind replaying her single word. Richard. That name had become both wound and target. He muttered, "It's time." His second chance had never been about comfort. It was about courage. The documents burned like fire in his hands, proof that could ruin Richard but also drag David back into the spotlight he had barely survived once. He stopped outside the towering glass office building, where Richard now worked. The contrast hit him, David in worn shoes, Richard behind polished doors of success. He whispered, "This is the line." His reflection in the glass doors showed a man torn between justice and survival. If he walked in, nothing could be undone. He tightened his grip on the folder, inhaled deep, and stepped toward the lobby, carrying years of silence into the light. The receptionist looked up, startled by David's sudden presence. "I need to see Richard," he said, voice steady but sharp. She hesitated, sensing something unspoken in his tone. Minutes later, Richard appeared at the top of the marble stairs, suit tailored, posture calm. His smile was controlled, not warm. "David," he said, "I wondered when you'd crawl back." The words sliced through the air. David held up the folder. "You didn't just rise when I fell. You made sure I fell." Richard's eyes flickered with something, a crack in his composure, but he replied, "Careful, old friend. Stories can ruin a man, but they can also bury you twice." The lobby grew still. David's chest tightened. This was no longer about whispers or suspicion. It was a battle of truths, one public and one buried. He whispered, "Then let's put both to the light." They entered Richard's private office, walls lined with books and awards. Richard poured whiskey, his movements casual, but eyes sharp. "You want revenge," he said smoothly. David shook his head, setting the folder on the desk. "I want the truth. You built your empire on my ruin." Richard chuckled low. "And yet here we are. You broke, me successful. Why not let the past rot where it belongs?" David's jaw clenched. "Because my daughter grew up believing her father abandoned her. That lie was your profit." Richard's hand tightened around his glass, mask slipping. Silence swelled until David said, "I could take this to the world, or I could leave it here. But only if you admit it, now, face to face." The room thickened with tension. Richard's gaze hardened, voice low and venomous. "Confession isn't in my nature." David leaned forward, whispering, "Then maybe grace will be." Richard stood, pacing, mask cracking further. "Do you think exposing me will rebuild your life?" His voice rose, sharp and defensive. David replied calmly, "Not my life, my daughter's trust." Richard's steps faltered, the words striking where arrogance couldn't shield him. David opened the folder, spreading documents across the desk. "Every signature, every deal while I was dragged down." Richard's face paled, his empire laid bare. He hissed, "If you do this, I'll take you with me." David inhaled, steady. "Maybe, but I'd rather fall again telling the truth than stand silent in your shadow." The silence became thunderous. Richard stared at the papers, his power unraveling. For the first time, David saw not a giant but a man cornered by his own making. David whispered, "Grace isn't about letting you walk free. It's about me refusing to carry your chains any longer." The final moment came sharp as glass. David gathered the documents, sliding them back into the folder. He looked Richard in the eye, voice firm. "I won't destroy you, Richard. That's too easy. I'll live the truth you tried to bury, and that will be enough." Richard's expression twisted, caught between fury and disbelief. "You're a fool," he spat. David stood, shoulders squared. "No, I'm free." The weight of vengeance lifted, leaving a raw clarity. His choice had been made, not to crush Richard, but to live without the poison of revenge. He walked to the door, folder in hand, every step a declaration that the past no longer owned him. Richard's voice followed, bitter and broken, but David didn't turn back. In that moment, the cost was real. No applause, no easy redemption, only the quiet strength of a man who chose costly truth over hollow victory. David walked out of Richard's office into the night, the city lights blurring against his tired eyes. The folder pressed against his side no longer felt like a weapon, it felt like release. He whispered, "I didn't win, but I didn't lose either." The streets were empty, yet each step carried a weight lifted from years of silence. The anger that once defined him had loosened its grip, leaving room for something quieter, dignity. He thought of Emily, her eyes widening when she saw the documents. She might not forgive him quickly, but she had seen truth. Thattered. Passing by a newsstand, he caught his reflection in the glass, lined, weary, but steady. For the first time in years, he recognized himself. He whispered, "I'm not the man they painted me as. I'm the man who chose not to stay broken." The words settled inside him like a steady flame. The next morning, David sat in a small diner, coffee steaming in front of him. He read the classifieds circling jobs with a borrowed pen. Each listing felt like a doorway, some narrow, some wide, all requiring persistence. The waitress set a plate down and said, "You look like a man starting over." David gave a faint smile, answering, "Starting over isn't the same as starting from nothing." She nodded knowingly before walking away. He sipped his coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. Around him, life hummed. People rushing, laughing, complaining. But he felt part of it again, not just a shadow on the edge. The folder sat beside him on the booth seat, unopened, not defining him but reminding him of what he had survived. He whispered, "This time, I'll show proof in hours worked, in promises kept, in showing up when it matters." Later that day, David returned to the bookstore. Emily was at the counter, her face unreadable as he approached. He cleared his throat. "I know last night was a lot. I don't expect you to trust me yet." Emily's eyes searched his, cautious but softer than before. "You chose not to bury him," she said quietly. David nodded. "Because revenge would have kept me chained. I want you to see me free." The silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. Emily picked up the folder and pushed it back toward him. "I don't need the papers, I need patterns." Her words landed heavy, but they were not rejection. David whispered, "Then I'll keep showing up one day at a time." Emily's lips pressed together, but she didn't turn away. For David, that was a door cracked open. The kind you walk through slowly, step by careful step. That evening, David met Mark again at the diner, updating him on the confrontation. Mark listened quietly, then said, "You walked out with dignity. That matters more than dragging him down." David stared into his coffee, voice low. "But what if it isn't enough for Emily?" Mark replied, "It's not about enough, it's about steady. Be who you are now, and she'll decide." David nodded slowly. He realized his second chance wasn't a single event, but a long road, built in daily acts. Mark added, "Remember, second chances are earned, not granted." David whispered, "Then I'll keep earning." For the first time he believed the path forward was his to walk, not Richard's to steal, not the past's to dictate. The diner's hum wrapped around him, ordinary and grounding. He no longer needed applause, he only needed consistency. David ended the night back in his apartment, lights dim, the city's hum outside his window. He placed the folder on a high shelf, out of reach but not out of sight. It no longer bound him, it was simply part of his story. He whispered, "The past is proof, not prison." The scuffed diploma caught his eye again, dusty but still there. He lifted it gently, wiped the glass clean, and hung it on the wall at last. The act was quiet, small, but monumental. He stood back, arms folded, staring at it like a promise. Tomorrow he would wake, look at that diploma, and remember who he had chosen to be. Not a victim of betrayal, not a man chained to headlines, but a father trying again, a worker showing up, a man steady in dignity. The silence of the room felt lighter now, touched by hope. Morning light streamed through David's apartment window, soft against the walls where the diploma now hung. He sat at the table with coffee in hand, the folder closed beside him. For years the folder had defined his nights, shaping every shadow. Now it rested quietly, no longer a weapon, just evidence of survival. He whispered, "I'll measure my life by what I build, not by what I lost." His phone buzzed, an unknown number again. He let it ring, then smiled faintly. Not every call needed answering. He focused instead on the job listing circled in yesterday's classifieds. For the first time, forward felt larger than backward. He whispered, "Second chances aren't promises, they're work." The words steadied him. He rose, grabbed his coat, and stepped toward the door. This time he wasn't carrying a folder of ghosts, just himself, unbroken. David arrived at the bus stop, the morning chill sharp in the air. This time he was early, the bus still a speck on the horizon. He whispered, "Patterns tell the truth." He pictured Emily, her guarded face at the bookstore, her words echoing inside him. Each step now was less about Richard and more about her. If she saw him show up, steady and reliable, maybe the walls would soften. He clenched his fists inside his pockets not from anger, but from determination. The bus pulled up, doors opening with a hiss. David stepped inside, greeting the driver with a nod. The small act mattered. It was a piece of proof. Another brick in rebuilding. He whispered under his breath, Not just words, not just wishes. Action. He settled into a seat by the window, the city rolling past, a new chapter turning quietly. At lunch, David stood outside the bookstore again, folder absent, just himself. He hesitated at the door but reminded himself. Consistency. Inside, Emily was stacking new arrivals, her face guarded, as always. He approached slowly, offering a paper bag with sandwiches. "I thought we could eat," he said. She paused, eyes flickering with surprise before she took the bag. They sat at a small table near the back, silence hanging heavy. David broke it gently. "I can't rewrite the years, but I can show you who I am now." Emily studied him, then said softly, "Keep showing up." The words weren't forgiveness, but they weren't rejection either. For David, they were more than enough. They were direction. He nodded, steady. The silence between them shifted, no longer a wall but the beginning of a bridge. That evening, David walked home beneath a quiet sky, the city soft with fading light. He passed the old community center, its windows glowing with the laughter of kids playing basketball. He stopped, watching through the glass. A boy missed a shot, then tried again, persistence in every motion. David smiled faintly, remembering Emily at that age. He whispered, "Second chances belong to anyone willing to keep trying." He didn't enter, this wasn't his moment, but he let the scene fill him with hope. The sound of sneakers and laughter bled into the street, wrapping him in memory and possibility. He turned toward home, steps lighter, no longer driven by rage or shame, but by purpose. Grace wasn't about forgetting. Grace was about building forward, step by imperfect step. Back in his apartment, David sat at the table, the city lights flickering beyond the window. He whispered to himself, "I paid in silence, in years lost, in dignity stripped. But I'm still here." His voice steadied, sharper now, "And I won't carry his chains any longer." He leaned back, staring at the diploma, at the folder high on the shelf, at the empty chair across from him where Emily might one day sit without hesitation. The silence in the room felt different tonight, less heavy, more alive. He closed his eyes, breathing deep, carrying both pain and promise. And then he whispered the line that would outlast him. "Second chances aren't free. I paid in full." The words hung in the air like stone, sharp, unshakable. The story was not over, but the strike was made.